FromSoftware has been making games since the early 90s, covering a wide array of genres from action, third-person shooter, survival horror, and hack and slash. Out of their entire repertoire, though, they're most famous for their Souls games. Games that encourage you to thoroughly explore their levels and study the carefully crafted descriptions for each item to piece together your own interpretation of the story. You meet well-developed characters throughout the games that only build up the story further, all the while facing daunting bosses that leave a distinct sense of pride and exhilaration upon defeat that pushes players to keep going no matter what hardships are to come. Much has been written and spoke about said aspects of these games, but one detail I haven't noticed others comment on is the consistent inclusion of disabled bosses and characters throughout the series. They appear in the beginning in Demon Souls and return throughout each game up to Night Rain. As a disabled woman, I'm very invested in seeing characters with disabilities, especially those with visible ones. But what's special about FromSoft isn't simply the inclusion of disabled characters, it's that they engage with different characters' disabilities differently. Some are hyper-competent and their disabilities don't appear to limit them in any way, but others are noticeably more affected, and some you can even use their disabilities against them to get what you want. This shows that FromSoft isn't squeamish over playing with how disability affects their characters, nor are they shy with having a lot of them. So let's explore who these characters are and how each of their disabilities affect their stories, along with how these depictions speak of disability in real life, starting with the very first game in the series, Demon Souls. Upon achieving pure white tendency in the Stonefang mines, you'll happen upon a squatter holed up in a now no longer abandoned tunnel. Upon appearances, nothing about him seems out of the ordinary, but once you speak to him, what's different becomes apparent.
Egads! You nearly frightened me to death, creeping up on me like that. My name is Scirvir. I seek treasures of the unknown.
Scirvir speaks with a prominent stutter, and upon talking with him, we learn of the existence of the Dragon Bone Smasher sword, which he expresses interest in seeing in person. What I like about Scirvir is that he speaks very confidently. His stutter doesn't come from him being nervous, it's just an affliction. At no point does he apologize for it either, clearly not worried over whether you can understand him, nor is he embarrassed by it. It's rare to see stutters presented this way, and I appreciate that FromSoft did so. He's the only character in the series with a form of speech impediment, which is a shame, because I would like to see it represented more. For any of you who've only played the remake, his voice may come as a surprise, and that's because they remove his stutter in that version.
Oh, there you go. You nearly frightened me to death, creeping up on me like that. My name is Scirvir. I seek treasures of the unknown.
Bluepoint made a number of character and world design changes in the remake, and while the majority of them are subjective on whether it was for the better, this one took away a core component to a character, and no reason it could have had for it will make erasing a disability look good. If you only heard Scirvir in the remake, I recommend checking out his dialogue from the 2009 version, just to hear what you missed. Thankfully, they didn't eliminate our next character's disability. Deep within the temple in the Shrine of Storms lies a behemoth sealed into the walls. You won't be able to see him clearer until you reach the base. As you approach, he'll break out of his stone prison. Once the fight starts, you will immediately notice that he's not running up to you. You see him walking around, attacking aimlessly, and waving his hand around in an effort to touch something. You'll quickly conclude that he's blind. At this point, you might remember a special ring you found in Lothric, or perhaps even the Swamp of Sorrows, the Thief's Ring. Wearing this ring masks your presence, and sure enough, Old Hero can't hear you when you wear it, giving you the upper hand in the fight. This is the first example in these games where you can use a character's disability against them. Doing so doesn't make the fight completely free. His attacks can still hit you, and they pack a punch if they do, but it's still a big advantage nonetheless. One might feel uncomfortable doing this, and thankfully it's optional if you wish to fight with the ring. But should it be in the game at all? Intentionally taking advantage of a blind character's weak point can certainly leave a bad taste in some people's mouths. But earlier I said that FromSoft wasn't squeamish over engaging with characters' disabilities, and I argued that adding an entire mechanic surrounding theirs to be doing just that. I like the addition of the Thief's Ring in the fight, as it means they made his blindness part of the game loop and you can actually interact with it. The game also allows you to play as an evil character, so taking advantage of Old Hero would only complement that. If the fight is still uncomfortable, I'm afraid these morally dubious actions don't stop with Old Hero. At the bottom of Blighttown is a cave covered in spiderwebs with egg bears praying before a suspicious fog wall. Behind the wall lies an equal parts monstrous but beautiful young woman, ready to attack us without a word, but at least with a smile. Quelaag is one of the most recognizable bosses in Dark Souls. However, our next topic is not her, but her sister. She is never given a name in-game, but her closest devotee, Engi, titles her as the Fair Lady, likely a nod to her pale skin along with her generous personality. The Fair Lady is blind, similar to Old Hero, and will believe you are Quelaag when you speak to her wearing the Old Witch's Ring. One difference between her and Old Hero is that the latter appears able-bodied outside of his blindness. While he struggles a bit finding you, he can lift his giant sword and charge at you with ease. The Fair Lady, on the other hand, is effectively bedridden if a bed were an option for her. You can choose to enter her covenant with or without the Old Witch's Ring, and you can sacrifice humanity to relieve her agony. We never fully heal her, but she thanks you for it if she believes you're Quelaag. The Fair Lady appears to be well respected and very likely given as much care as those around her are capable of giving. She holds nothing but fondness for Quelaag, and while she never addresses Engi, the latter could not make his devotion more clear. If you speak to him more, he'll explain that upon escaping the Great Swamp, he was infected with blight pus, which the Fair Lady sucked out of him to ease his suffering, something that was against Quelaag's wishes, most likely because of the suffering it brought upon the Fair Lady herself. We can safely assume that her blindness and overall poor health came from the blight pus. The narrative on a whole presents the Fair Lady as someone worthy of respect and care. She's not seen as a burden by Quelaag or Engi. The Fair Lady herself doesn't seem to begrudge her position either. As shown with Engi, she is endlessly selfless, never complaining about the pain she's in, and always telling Quelaag to look out for herself. She truly plays the role of a saint. While this makes it understandable why she's well-liked, it's quite sanitized in her character and her state never once expressed despair or anger over her position and only care about others. It's reflective of how many disabled people, especially chronically ill ones, are expected to not complain about their disabilities and ailments and simply carry on. Disability is supposed to be silent. There also lies the element of deceit with how you pretend to be Quelaag. As you're given no dialogue options, something that is of minimal quantity across all these games, we can't be sure if we're purposely trying to deceive her or we're unable to share our real identity. Once again, the Fair Lady is reflective of Old Hero in that you take advantage of her blindness as well. However, instead of using it as a tactical advantage, you're taking on the guise of her now late sister, whom you killed. It's hard to say what FromSoftware's intent was for adding this, but I assume the whole ordeal is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. With Old Hero and the Fair Lady covered, you're likely getting tired of being a conniving little worm, which means you'll appreciate who's coming up next. As you progress through Dark Souls, you'll learn more about Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, along with his 4 trusted knights. As with most things you read about in Dark Souls, you'll likely assume that these knights are of a bygone age and will never actually meet them. For a certain value, that's true. You will run into one of the knights, Dragonslayer Ornstein, in Anor Londo halfway through the game, but later learn that he was an illusion. The other 3, however, you do meet, and it's by getting spirited away to that bygone age. After defeating the Sanctuary Guardian, you'll enter the Royal Woods proper and meet 2 individuals that can clue you in on the situation.
Thou shalt see further on, an abyss was begat of the ancient beast, and threatens to swallow the whole of Ulasil. Knight Artorias came to stop this, but such a hero has nary a murmur of dark.
Did you happen across Knight Artorias, the legendary abyss walker from the old tales? Well, if you haven't, it's just as well. He's a colorless sort, if you ask me.
Both will speak of Knight Artorias, by far the most popular knight you will have learned about by now, with multiple people even outside of Ulasil talking about him. You're left with a concerning picture of him battling the Abyss, and after some exploring, you'll discover him in the flesh. Artorias is one of the most iconic bosses in the entire series. He makes a strong entrance in his opening cutscene with the jump attack on the Abyss Guard. He kills the creature with ease, but as he turns to you, you can see his left arm completely limp at his side. It dangles when he spins around, clearly conveying how unusable it is. Once the fight begins, however, you'll quickly learn that this restriction isn't slowing Artorias down in the slightest. It's still quite obvious he can't use the other arm, but you'll see next to no struggle from him as he fights you. His limp arm and his performance is clearly meant to convey how powerful he is. You have to wonder what he was like at his prime. He's quite different from Old Hero and the Fair Lady. You have nothing to take advantage of. While Artorias is certainly impressive, I'm afraid I don't have more to offer on him than that. His hyper-competence is actually his greatest weakness, as we get no real insight on how his disability affects him, how he feels about it, or how it affects his story at all. This does make sense, given what's happened to him. This is a very recent injury, and his mind has effectively been broken by the Abyss, so we're not going to get any real character from him. But unfortunately, this means there isn't much to say about him outside of he's incredible. Most people love the exceptional disabled person, but this usually comes at the cost of their disability being acknowledged at all. This is in how the person feels about it, and in how the disability impacts their life, because it must. When we lack these things, we just get disabled people who aren't actually disabled, and that's very much the archetype that Artorias fulfills. This is not to say that any depiction of a competent disabled person is bad, but if their disability isn't explored in any way, then it'll always be lacking. Our next character, however, will give us a very clear insight into their disability and how it relates to their personhood, so let's continue to them. Past Artorias, there are still 2 more knights to meet. One, Gehrman, can be found at a small grave she made in the Colosseum for Artorias, and the final one requires you to find a key in the derelict Ullasil township. Once found, returning to the Colosseum and traversing the surrounding staircase will lead you to stumbling on some carving sounds. Entering the door and climbing the ladder will reveal the source, a giant by the name of Hawkeye Gough.
A visitor, have we? Thou must be the one who freed Artorias. An old friend he was. Thanks to thee, he left this world with honor intact. And here I am, retired and blind. Of little help to thee, I'm afraid.
Gough's blindness is a result of imprisonment, where his helm's eye holes were stuck with resin. We can assume the resin damaged his eyes, that's why he doesn't simply remove his helm. Gough initially questions his ability to help you, but he'll notice that you're struggling with Calamite and eventually will offer his services to you. Despite his doubts, his archery is still among the best of them. You might be wondering, isn't Gough like Artorias? Him taking down Calamite was nothing short of incredible. It's true that Gough can perform impressive archery, but his disability is actually acknowledged within the game both by him and the narrative. We know that his feelings regarding him and his blindness are complex, which reflects actual disabled people. While he questioned his usefulness earlier, he showed very clear pride in the shot he took at Calamite.
Ha ha! Yes. A truer shot was never loosed. That bat will be grounded for a good spell.
One interesting bit of info I'll impart is that while writing this video, I looked online for any information on how Gough could tell where Calamite was, and only found a single Reddit post. With the exception of a few, all the comments simply answered with, "He's just that good." This may seem innocuous, but it highlights an issue where people don't want to engage with people's disabilities. They just want them to be incredible despite them. Only a couple people in the thread mentioned that Gough likely developed a keen sense of hearing and could pinpoint Calamite that way. For everyone else, no one cared about the details of how Gough navigates the world. He's just a badass and that's all he needs to be. This is reflective of the prevailing attitude I've seen in others and experienced in my own life, this fundamental lack of curiosity some people have towards disabled people. Just no questions for how we do the things we do. I can only speak for myself, but I find the phenomenon quite isolating. Disabled people come up with very clever ways to adapt, and I wish people were more interested in the details rather than the results. I'm leaving the boundaries of the game currently talking about this, but I believe that real people's reactions to a disabled character and how it relates to real-world attitudes should be discussed. In fact, I would say that how people interpret characters and story in media to be the most important part of media. For our next character, I'll also cover real people's reactions towards their disability, though they are subject to more scrutiny than Gough. After undergoing your blood ministration in the curious town of Gehrman, you experience a nightmare that leaves you waking up in an abandoned clinic. With no clear course forward outside of what you find on a note by your operating table, you explore the clinic in town proper, searching for answers. You'll quickly find a special lamp outside and, upon using it, be transported to someplace completely new. After finding an abandoned doll and picking up some weapons, you'll find a man in the building just up the stairs.
Aha! You must be the new hunter. Welcome to the hunter's dream. This will be your home for now. I am... Gehrman. Friend to you hunters.
One of the first things apparent about Gehrman is that he's sitting in a wheelchair. Upon closer inspection, you'll also see that he's missing a leg and carrying a cane. The cane is actually a hint towards his overall mobility. It shows that he's able to stand, just not all the time. This hint is missed by many, and most won't learn that he can do this until he stands up before you much later in the game, in an effort to free you from the dream. He cuts in an imposing figure either way. His fight is quite impressive with his large range of quick movement, rolls, and attacks. It's led many to question if Gehrman needs his wheelchair at all, and some go one step further and claim he's intentionally faking it. Let's address that real quick. Gehrman still has a pegged leg when he stands up, and it remains during the fight, so there's not much subterfuge going on here. There's also little reason for him to pretend to need a wheelchair. What purpose does that serve? To take us by surprise when we fight? He's hoping that we sacrifice ourselves willingly. He doesn't want to fight us. And if we do, we'd be just as surprised by his challenge if he lacked the wheelchair, so he's not getting any upper hand by standing up from a chair. The whole theory just falls apart when you actually think about it. The answer is that disability is complicated. Different people have a range of capabilities, and those will often depend on the day, very much like for everyone else. The more likely situation is that Gehrman is giving his all in the fight under the assumption that once he frees you, he'll not need to fight again in quite a while, sitting in his wheelchair will be for rest and recovery. Truly, his time spent in his wheelchair and his time spent in the flower field do not contradict each other at all. And it's a great depiction of a disabled person and elderly person to boot that's capable of great physical feats, but still has to contend with the fallout from those feats and take necessary care from it. To me, this is an exceptional disabled person done well. It's admirable that FromSoftware created an example of this, instead of simply ones who are only impressive. Our next entry is an example of the latter, but with an interesting twist. In quite a shift in scenery, Sekiro takes us to a fictive version of the late Sengoku era. Unlike their Souls games, Sekiro has a dedicated protagonist by the name of Wolf. Very early in the game, Wolf attempts to protect Lord Kuro from Genichiro, and regardless if Wolf wins the fight or not, his forearm gets sliced off by Genichiro. After passing out in the field, he awakens in a small temple with quite a surprise waiting for him. Wolf's prosthetic arm and prosthetic tools play a central part to the game's combat, along with navigating levels with the grappling hook. There's quite a range of functionality in the tools as well, ranging from an axe, iron umbrella, and even firecrackers. It's quite a marvel of design, far more advanced and stylized than what they had in the actual Sengoku era, and even by the leading inventors in the Netherlands. So it can be surprising how blasé everyone is by it. People rarely comment on it, and even the sculptor treats it as a hand-me-down when he gives it to us, it apparently not being helpful for carving Buddha statues. While a lot of detail is put into the mechanics of Wolf's prosthetic, very little was put into him as a disabled character. For starters, he doesn't take any time to adjust to having a prosthetic. This feat would be unrealistic with one even less advanced, but he just immediately knows how to use it alongside all the tools that go with it. And it's fine if FromSoftware didn't want to address that part and just allowed the player to get up and go, but it still affects the realism. Aside from that, Wolf just accepts the change and moves on. Outside of the first scene with the sculptor, he never talks about it. This is because he's intended to be a very subdued character. He does not react to much in general. Again, it's fine that FromSoftware chose to portray him this way, but all these things added together resulted in being a very uncompelling character from a disabled lens. Indeed, I run into a very similar problem I had with Artorias, where I don't have much to say about Wolf. In fact, I have even less to say. I was deliberating back and forth whether to include him at all, and ultimately decided to do so simply because he's a disabled main character, and a lot of creativity is put into his prosthetic. Playing with accessibility aids in this fashion is underutilized in fiction, and FromSoftware fleshing the Wolves out to the extent they did should be commended. As many of you have no doubt guessed, this will not be the only person in the video with the prosthetic. But before we see them, we've seen good and some at least questionable depictions of disability, but we're about to shake things up with our first unequivocally bad one. As you make your way through the undead settlement, you'll happen upon an individual wearing gargoyle-looking armor. You'll quickly learn he is not looking to be your friend, and he effectively tells you to go to hell and die. But you'll soon notice he's near a locked cell door, and jumping down the hole behind him will allow you to get to the other side. But what could he be guarding? Surprisingly, just a woman curled up in the corner of the cell. What crime could she have committed?
Who is there? Is someone there? Anyone? Oh, please, whoever you are, touch me. The dark surrounds me, nibbles at my flesh. Little creatures, they never stop biting. So please, hold out your hand and touch me.
Talking to her further will reveal that her name is Irina and that she left Carim to become a firekeeper in Lothric. However, she was not strong enough to become one. This is a source of shame for her and something that Egon, her guard, mercilessly resents her for. And this is basically what her character arc amounts to. She's useless and pathetic, a belief that she and especially Egon uphold. This was by far the harshest depiction of disability in all these games, and as bad as we can get for other characters, I truly believe that none of their writing is as mean-spirited as Irina's. There is simply no opinion given of her that's positive, by anyone. She doesn't express any sense of independence or pride either, although I find despair for one situation interesting and realistic, and people living in environments like she does with Egon will internalize their resentment. So I don't begrudge Irina for that. My issue with her writing is nothing challenges the belief that she deserves all this. One ending involves giving Irina dark braille divine tomes and learning their dark miracles from her. The darkness that bites and nibbles at her becomes even stronger, and soon she won't register your touch at all anymore, believing she's alone in her darkness once again. The only way for her to feel your touch is to wear Egon's gauntlets, where she then assumes you're Egon. She then begs you, Egon, to fulfill his promise and kill her, which is the only real option you're given to do. In her other ending, you can help her become a firekeeper by giving her pure braille divine tomes and learning all her miracles from her. Her reward for finally achieving what she never believed she could is being isolated at the bottom of a dilapidated tower, full of the corpses of previous firekeepers, and once again, completely alone. These are the only two endings you can have with her. And I know what you're thinking, doesn't everyone in FromSoftware games get bad endings? First of all, no. Second of all, bad endings should still have good writing. A sad ending should have catharsis and it should make sense, no matter how much it hurts. It makes no sense for Irina to be isolated like this. And you visiting her doesn't make this better when you're her only source of contact and you're potentially away for days on end. The standard firekeeper you level up with gets to socialize with others in Firelink, so why can't Irina? And surely Egon must have something to say about Irina proving her worth, and no, there's nothing. Her only options are for her blindness to destroy her so completely that she has to be put down, or she lives in isolation for the rest of her life. Truly, there's no positivity extended to Irina at any point in her story, and there's no catharsis or satisfaction to be had with that. Irina's story would have been upsetting and unfulfilling regardless, but it's even worse knowing that she's disabled too. I trust I don't have to explain why being told you're worthless and will never amount to anything hits especially hard when you're disabled. Even if you claim that technically Irina was considered useless for not being a firekeeper and not for being blind, the game is still harping on calling a blind woman useless. Regardless of what reason you want to focus on, calling a disabled woman broken will always be loaded. In addition, the sentiment that she can never escape her position, doomed to be stuck in the darkness alone forever, regardless of her ending, is contemptible as well. Irina is undeserving of comfort, acknowledgement, or respect, and that's all the story has for her, and that's just a terrible depiction of disability. However, Irina's isolation ties in perfectly with our next character, or rather characters. With them, we'll see no sense of loneliness or isolation at all, making them a special entry in this video. With what I would call the worst depiction of a disabled character done, it may surprise you that what I consider the best is in the same game. In fact, they are what made me want to make this video. In Dark Souls 3, you're tasked with seeking out and destroying 4 Lords of Cinder and then taking their ashes back to Firelink Shrine to give you the power to link the flame once again. The final Lord of Cinder is the young Prince Lothric, a frail man who's rejected his destiny to link the flame with the support of his brother, Lorian. When you find Lothric, he tells you as much, content with allowing the fire to fade away for good. As he speaks to you, a figure crawls from the shadows, who you can surmise is Lorian. Once he crawls up to the platform, the fight begins. The second the fight starts, you learn immediately how these two pose a threat.
This spot marks our grave, but you may rest here too, if you like.
Lorian will attack with his sword while Lothric teleports him around the arena. Later in the fight, after injuring Lorian enough, Lothric will hug the former's back and teleport them both around the arena, while shooting magic at you as well. On the surface, this seems like a clever method to portray a duo boss, but there's so much more than that. This is my favorite fight in the FromSoftware games, because this is the first time we see 2 disabled characters working together, rather than just one by themselves. Neither Lothric nor Lorian would be able to face us if they lacked each other's support, but together they become one of the most challenging bosses in Dark Souls 3. We've covered a few disabled bosses already, with more to come, but all of them face you alone. Even outside of FromSoftware, I don't know of any boss that involves 2 disabled people working together to cover their blind spots like Lothric and Lorian do. I find this depiction incredibly important because it presents disabled people who can't survive by themselves. Regardless of what they're experiencing, disabled people are expected to strive for independence, no matter what. This is why the most popular disabled characters are Artorias, Malenia, and even Gough, characters that are exceptional despite their disabilities. I myself have received much praise and attention for playing these games while missing a hand, but the harsh truth is, not all disabled people are like this. Some can't live independently and require care from another person. And some can live independently, but still suffer from heavy restrictions in their day-to-day life. There's a range in experience for disabled people, but people don't want to see the scary side of disability. Earlier I said that people don't want to engage with people's disabilities, and this is an example of it. But this time, it's not simply a lack of curiosity, it's fear as well. People don't want disability to happen to them, especially the most debilitating. They can believe that great effort can make you achieve anything, when in reality that isn't always the case. A major part of being disabled is learning to adapt to the world around you while also making peace with your limitations. Returning to Lothric and Lorian, not only do they support each other, they do so happily, no bitterness from either side. It's a beautiful sense of camaraderie forged through brotherhood and shared experience. I don't know if FromSoftware knew how special of a boss they made, but I'll always appreciate them for doing so. While this is my favorite entry in our list, there still remains one more character to finish out the video, and likely the most anticipated. Elden Ring is FromSoftware's first open-world game, and thusly has an abundance of places you can explore. One such late area is Miquella's Halleck Tree, a failed-to-be Erd tree raised on Miquella's blood. Upon entering the base of the tree, you'll see a woman sitting in a chair next to the roots, her arm outstretched, touching them. At first, she doesn't appear to notice your presence at all, but then she speaks.
I dreamt for so long. My flesh was dull gold, and my blood rotted. Corpse after corpse left in my wake. As I awaited his return. Heed my words. I am Malenia, Blade of Miquella. And I have never known defeat.
Malenia is not only one of the most popular disabled characters in the series, she's arguably the face of Elden Ring, and with that game being the most successful, that makes her one of the most popular characters, period. But what exactly plagues her? Malenia's primary affliction is scarlet rot, a fictional disease she had since birth. The rot acts like a flesh-eating virus and dissolves away parts of her body. Up until now, I've only discussed real-world disabilities of each of these characters, but scarlet rot causes many real-world disabilities with the rotting away of the body and mind, so it's worth focusing on the disease and its effects. The most prominent deficiency Malenia has is losing her right arm, which is replaced with a very beautiful and ornate prosthetic. She has also lost her right calf and her entire left leg, both replaced with prosthetics. The rot has eaten away at her eyes, and finally a general decay all over her body. Yet, in spite of all this, her cutscenes are picturesque. She is presented as a goddess, with all the beauty and power that entails. Even the Lord of Shaded Castle Malé Marais worshipped Malenia, and is explicitly described as being beguiled by the beautiful and fierce goddess who was born into rot. The emphasis on beauty and power for Malenia is not something often extended to visibly disabled people like her, so the inclusion is honestly refreshing. On the other hand, though, it's obvious that there was a limit to the grotesqueness that they were willing to portray to maintain that beauty. There was also a good amount of thought put into her prosthetics. Malenia's arm has her sword slotted into the device and is an extension of the arm, not simply a weapon she carries. Wherever she received the prosthetic, the creator clearly understood that Malenia was a warrior and adapted it to fit that need and lifestyle. So, we can already see some promising aspects of Malenia's depiction, but what about her as a character? Well, Malenia is quite an enigma. She reveals very little about herself in your encounter with her. We can surmise that she's confident in her skills and that she's devoted to Miquella, but that's the extent you can gather from your actual interaction with her. To look past that, you need to find more lore about her throughout the rest of the game. One key source is from none other than her daughter, Millicent. Millicent is a young woman afflicted with scarlet rot in Caelid who you can rescue by staving off her rot with a special golden needle. Once she presses the needle in her and her rot halts, she sets on a journey to find Malenia. When you later meet her in the Halleck Tree, she'll talk about Malenia abandoning her dignity and giving in to the scarlet rot in a vain attempt attempt to defeat Radahn. During their battle in Caelid, Malenia used Scarlet Aeonia for the first time and completely ravaged the surrounding areas with Scarlet Rot, in addition to completely breaking Radahn's mind. The attack caused great damage, but it also put Malenia into a deep sleep. Her soldier, Finlay, had to carry her back to the Haligtree. The fact that Malenia had to sacrifice her dignity to perform this action means that she knew of the power of the Scarlet Rot, but up until then refused to use it and simply suffered through the negative effects without making use of any of the positives. Her reasons for this are not entirely out of a sense of pride either. Every time she performs Scarlet Aeonia, her Scarlet Rot advances. So this is very much out of a sense of preservation as well. She would only acquiesce to tapping into it when she was about to suffer defeat and likely meet her end. This is apparent in your battle with her as well. She uses no Rot power in the first phase of the fight and uses Scarlet Aeonia for the second time ever at the start of second phase when it's clear she was meeting her match. With all that in mind, her boasting at the beginning of your fight with her is likely touched with a bit of bravado. She's effectively licking her wounds after not technically losing, but not technically winning her showdown with Radahn. And now she has to contend with the fact that she not only can be defeated, she just advanced her Scarlet Rot, sacrificing who knows what part of her body next. Surely, this is the lowest we've seen her in her life, and she hides it well when she challenges you. Malenia is outwardly a hyper-competent disabled person. She shows little signs of struggle in doing anything. However, for her, it's a question of time. She's had this affliction from birth, and it has steadily eaten away at her as she grew. If the condition continues, she will reach a point where she won't be able to pull off her impressive feats. Indeed, she'll likely not be able to pull off anything. This reflects that some people in real life who contract degenerative illnesses that either kill or simply disable them slowly as they age. In either case, you have a set time before you lose your abilities. Malenia worsens her condition with each time she blooms Scarlet Aeonia, and try as she might, she can't keep herself from using it. Her end draws closer, and she's speeding it along. And with that, we've reached the conclusion of this video. Ending it all off with Malenia felt the most fitting. This wasn't every single disabled character in these games, but it was all the ones I found the most compelling. Observant viewers may have noticed that there were no characters from Dark Souls 2. There are disabled characters in the game, the old Firekeepers and Dark Diver Grandal. But Grandal isn't very interesting to me, and the old Firekeeper stories isn't terribly different from the Fair Lady and Irina. I wanted this video to have more focus rather than cover every instance of disability, but it's heartening to know that there are even more outside of what I covered. What's exciting still is that FromSoftware shows no signs of halting their inclusion of disabled characters, as we even have one in Night Rain with Fulgor, a powerful centaur missing an entire left arm. As you damage him in his fight, he'll grow back his arm in the form of a black miasma that takes on the appearance of Manus's or even Cleribeast's arm. And in his Everdark form, he ascends into the heavens and regrows his arm that matches his right one. The implication that the gods themselves answered his prayers and cured him of his disabilities is loaded as much as what we already covered. I hope this video was an informative look into disabilities in media and real life for some, and a validating experience for others. I thoroughly enjoyed fleshing out each of these characters, especially in a manner that many don't think of them. FromSoftware isn't perfect with every instance of disability in their games, but what I appreciate about them is that they're not trying to be. They're trying to tell a story through them. We saw a broad range of experiences, and in some ways this video almost wrote itself because of the sheer number of complex characters to choose from. Even Irina, the character portrayal I found the most offensive, still had her disability as a core part of her story. It was still engaged with. And it's this variety that's so special about FromSoftware. They keep trying new things, never sticking to the same type of disabled person for each game. And for that, I can easily forgive one offensive portrayal. I think it's better to sincerely try than back off out of the fear of messing up, and I say that for anyone attempting to write a disabled character. With those thoughts, I'll see you in the next video, which will focus on a character we touched on today.
Dear, oh dear. What was it? The hunt? The blood? Or the horrible dream?